Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Lena, and I'll be doing a quick workshop around creative computing. I'll briefly talk about what it is. What is the broader field, field that you can use around this, and what are the technology that you can actually try out and use during the hackathon? Because there's quite a lot of tools and quite a lot of libraries out there that are very useful, not only for creative computing, but also for starting out as a programmer, because they're easy to start with, they're easy to use, and mostly they're aimed to be as a visual tool, as a tool that you can use to create something that is visual and immediate, as it is creative computing, which is why they're very, very good tools to be used for creating projects, let's say games, music applications, weird backgrounds for your website, stuff like that, and it's very, very cool. So one of the tools that we're going to use today is called p5.js. It's a library for JavaScript. How it's used, I will show you, and I will show you how to start with it, and how to actually go into more detail and how to apply it in your projects as well. The first things first, I wanted to mention what really is creative computing. Creative computing is this underfield between computer science and art. And how it works is that in this age, in this modern age, even more and more artistic and humanities fields go into finding and using tools that are related to technology, such as programming. There are a lot of artists out there, and there's a lot of musicians out there who use programming as a tool. So they don't do web development, but they do their own different interdisciplinary fields. One great example is music computing, where even more and more music is not really recorded anymore in the studio with 5-people band, but it's more and more being programmed, and is being programmed by using a computer and using specific applications, specific software such as MaxMSP, or there's a Python library for this as well that was actually, by the way, created in a hackathon, and there are many more. The same goes for arts, and the same goes for performance arts. In theater is becoming more and more used, especially in the lights and in scenography, how you can change the landscape and not actually create real furniture, but make the lights seem that the furniture is there, from kind of like looks and lights and shadows, and joining that in. Another big one is, of course, design and creating 2D or 3D visualizations. They can be used for art galleries, they can be used for websites. There are a lot of things out there that use technology as a tool, and sometimes it goes into printing, and sometimes it goes into animations or visuals that are being used in some other media. Very, very often it goes into advertising, advertising for such silly things as, I don't know, clothes, powder, or I don't know, laptops, something like that, selling an object. And sometimes, very often, it goes into shops and advertising how a fashion brand works, and so on. So a big also underfield is video clips and concerts, where creative programming is used quite a lot. There are special people who have really done this for a longer period of time, and their specialty is light and making kind of like interesting stories around light. Here, one of the examples that you can Google around is Kraftwerk concert, where you can see how they played around with light, and they've actually employed a team of developers to do this. A team of, in this case, we would call them creative technologists or creative programmers. And there's quite a lot of this, and there's quite a vast world around it there that you can leverage and that you can use. There's a lot of libraries in JavaScript as well that allow you to use AR, VR, or they allow you to do animations easier, and 3D animations, such as, I think there's Babylon.js, and there's also 3JS that is very, very popular that you can also look into, and you can come up with new ideas just based on the libraries that you research. And JavaScript also has has that really cool quality that it's fairly easy to get started with, and it's fairly easy to learn in the beginning, especially if there's a library that has examples, and especially if there's a library that can get you kind of doing the first hello worlds and doing the first touches and examples of trying to see how it works and trying to see what it does. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to P5 and take a look what it is and take a look what it does and how we can use it in our project. So I'm gonna head out to my browser. I'm gonna open a new one, empty one. And here I'm gonna type in p5.js, which is the library that I just mentioned. After typing in, I can see the first page that comes up is p5.js. So I'm gonna press on that, and I'm just gonna walk through what it is and what it does. So in here, you can see there's a page to download. The hello beginning shows you how to use and how to work with it. And then the coolest thing that you have in P5 is that it has a reference. So all the functions that are out there that are possible and everything that you can really do with this. As you can see, there's quite a lot. And so there's quite a lot of possibilities. And another thing in here is that you can have examples. And examples are useful because you can open them, see how the thing works, how the animation works, and then change it right there in the example. So let's press on tickle. And as you can see, if you go into this small text, it tickles, let's say. Not really, it just moves around. The good thing, and it has quite a lot of these animations, and we'll start creating our own, or at least start creating shapes that move on our own, and then I will leave you to yourself to discover what's out there. But another thing that is very cool that they have is they have a sound library, and the sound library can be used to play sounds and use the volume, the pitch of, let's say, your microphone or a sound that you load, let's say an MP3 file, to create visualizations or to create any other effect that you can come up with. And I can show you an example in here. I think this is mic input. What it does in here is it moves the ball higher if I am louder, and it moves it lower if I'm quieter. And this is actually a very, very cool tool that you can create many applications with. Maybe for some of you, you've seen the ideation file where you can see a couple of ideas that we've shared with you that you can work on. One of the ideas here was that you can use the sound, and you can use the volume of the sound in order to change shapes. This time it's the ball that's moving up and down. There's quite a lot. So for example, you can put the whole image or the whole screen with different images, and then, or 3D shapes, and then depending on different sounds, you could change how these shapes change as well, or the width or the height of these shapes. So this is a very, very interesting thing, and music in general is a very interesting field that you can go into. And what we're going to do is we're going to get started. We're going to go to get started. We can see what are the options here. One of the most popular options is to get started with the P5.js editor. This is a web editor. So it's a web application where you can open it and you can test and try out P5 just to see how it works and just to see how things move around. Afterwards, we'll try and go into something more into detail. So as we're here, you can see that this is the website where they allow you to test this idea. And further on, you can see that up there where my mouse is there's a login or sign up. So what I would suggest for you to do, in case you're doing it through here, you need to log in. And after we have logged in, this is so that whenever there's a reload, you make sure that you can save your work. And if you sign in, you can save your work. If you haven't signed in, you cannot save your work. This is just to prevent any of these things to happen. So first one's first. So as you can see, there are already two functions in here that they have created for us. One of them is called function setup. The function setup here is, as you might assume, the function that when whatever method you include in there is going to set things up. So how you can think about this is, firstly, before you draw or before you start working on an art piece, that's the simplest way to explain it. Before you start working on something, you firstly need to find a medium. Let's say I'm thinking that I'm gonna do a painting. So what I first need is brushes, colors, and I also need a canvas. So right here, you can also see that there's text written that says create canvas. So what it does, it creates a space for us to draw, a space for us to create either animations or whatever we want to create. It firstly gives us a space. So after we've created a function setup that you always need to have in all of these P5 library applications, you need to also have a create canvas that defines how big is your playground. And in this create canvas, as we can see, there are two numbers. The first number defines how wide our page is, or how playground, let's put it like that, is going to be. And the second number is going to define how high our page is going to be. So we're going to use these and say that actually our page, the one that we can draw on, and you will see how that works later, is going to be 400 by 400 pixels wide and high. The second thing that we can see in here is a function that says function draw. This is also something that you always need within these P5 library examples. What the function draw does is that is the function in which you put all the animations, all the real stuff that is happening around and will happen around within your application, whether it's animations or music visualization or game, whatever you might think of. This is the point where you're going to put in all the information here. All the methods, the functions, everything is going to go through here first. So what we're going to do is we can see that the first method or instruction, let's say, is backgrounds. And as we might assume, background from English translate is, yeah, the background of our screen. And we are going to define a color in there. We could also in the future put in images, put in other stuff. In here, we're just going to start with putting a color. And as you can see, the number in here also defines a color. And this goes into how into different color schemes, how colors are defined. But for now, let's stay with the theory that if you put in 0, it's going to be black. If you put 255, 255, it's going to be white. So 255 is the highest and brightest. The least you can go is 0, which is going to be black. In order to see how it works, so we know that we have a playground and we know that we've colored it. So if, as I mentioned, 255 is white, then 220 is going to be not really white, but fairly high up there. So in order to see everything, we're going to press play. We press play, and as we can see, there's a rectangle, and the rectangle in here is 400 by 400 pixels, and it's colored in light gray. The same as we said in here, the same as we said in here. So the next thing that we can do is we can try out what I said before. So let's try and do a black one. Bam, here we have a black one. As I mentioned, 255 is going to be bigger. What if we want to have colors, like various colors, let's say red? So what we do in here is we are going to use an Rgb color scheme. There are many out there. This is one of the most popular ones to use, and this is the one that is mainly used in P5 as well. So in here, if we want red, how Rgb color scheme works is that for each of the abbreviations R, G, and B, you can define how much of that specific color you want within your mixed color, or let's say background. R, as you might assume, stands for red, G for green, and B for blue. So I can say with numbers how much I want of each color to be in my mixed color. So I'm going to say if I want red, I'm going to say 255 for red. I don't want green and I don't want blue, because I just said I'm trying to get my red color going. Oh, sorry. And here I need to put, this is red, this is green, and this is blue. So I'm going to have a red. As you might see, if you mix the colors together and if you put varying numbers in each of these spaces, you can change the color as well. And we can put in here not only the value is 255, we can put something in between. We can say this is going to be 150, or even more random, or let's say 153, just to see what goes. This one is a very, very bright pink one. It's a bit too much, let's say. Let's put 100 in here and try to mix it all together and see what happens. And in here, okay, so we've got violet, not the most beautifulest one, violet, a bit crazy as we can see in here. And I think we can go up and then remain with this and then continue on. So the next step that we can do in here is that we've created a canvas. We know this is the width and the height. We can change the width into, let's put it wider, let's say 800 and 500. So it's gonna be like this. So as you can see, here's the screen. First, we have our screen, and now we can start creating some animations, some figures. So how do we create figures? Similarly as in geometry. Firstly, we have a point. We need to know how to create a point. So we say point, and for a point to exist, we need to define where it is in this whole playground, whole space. As you might remember, we said it's 800, our playground is, or canvas is 800 pixels wide and 800 pixels high. So what you can do in here is you can think of it as a grid, as a coordinate grid. And that's how it's supposed to be thought of. And in the top left corner, yes, top left corner, the point is 0, 0. So in here, if you can see my mouse, it's 0, 0. And the numbers, as you might assume, because it's to here, wider, and down here, it's higher. So how it goes is that the X axis, it goes to your right, and the Y-axis goes down, which is slightly different that you're used to when it's just flipped. In math, it's usually flipped the other way, so that the X goes up and the Y goes down and the X is here. So it's kind of a flipped coordinate system the other way around, but it's still easy to understand this way. So we start on the left higher corner, and we can go and define the both the height and width of something based on these pixels and on this coordinate system, and we can find where something is. So if we have our 0, 0 point up here in the left top corner, we can say, check that if we put 0, 0, where is gonna, if our point is gonna be where we think it is. So as you can maybe see, here is our point. It's very hard to see. And what we can do is expand our point, make it bigger. So how to make it bigger? One of the options here is stroke weight. By default, our stroke weight, maybe it's easy to think it's like boldness, weight is 1, and we're going to put it as 5 and see what happens. So in here, we created 5. It's a bit bigger. Let's make it 10. And now we can see it more. So in case we want to move the point somewhere, we're going to do it, try and make it in the middle. So the middle would be the middle of 800, so 400. And the middle of 500 would be 250. So we have a point somewhere in here, and we can see that we've created our point, and we can also change its color. This also goes similarly to the background, but in here we're going to say just stroke, and we're going to put a lighter color so that we can see it. So let's say 250, 200, and maybe 200. It's going to be lighter. Here's our point. Next things next. So how to create a line. Line is this very, very similar that a point. So it basically consists of 2 points that are connected together. So what we're going to do is we need 4 coordinates together, 4 points together, the beginning point and the ending point. So we technically need the beginning point and the ending point. So I'm going to do just random ones, and I'm going to try to create a line down here in the right corner. So I'm going to say 10, 20, and 10, 60. And I'm going to have a line in here. So we have a line in here, very, very thick. We're going to push it down to here and say that it is 5. So it's a bit thicker, thinner. Okay, next one's up, rectangles. Let's do a rectangle. The first thing you need for a rectangle, similar to any shape that we've covered so far, is its coordinates. So we're gonna do this shape somewhere else so that we don't get lost in all the shapes around here. So this shape we will do in, let's say, 50 bit down, so that it doesn't intrude into our other
Es tik atvēru Zoom, kur Līna tagad stāst. Vai sorry?
Duh, someone's talking. Okay. Yeah, it's fine. Okay. So, and we have a rectangle, and we have the points in a rectangle, and we're gonna create them wider and higher. So the width and height we can define similar as to the create canvas. So we can say 50, 50. This is going to do a rectangle that has the same amount of pixels in width than in height. Let's see how it works. Hey, here's a rectangle. Ooh. In our rectangle, similar then to everything else, we can also fill it with color. As you can see, it's white because we haven't defined a color, but we can define it. And because it's a shape, it's not a just a line or a point. We can fill a color inside of it. There used to be this application called Paint where you could fill a color inside of something. This works the same way. So what it's going to do is going to fill the color inside, but the stroke is the one that defines the border of everything that you have. The point and the line, as you can see, is pink, and the outline of the rectangle as well. The inside of it is going to be in a specific color. So we're going to say fill. What color could we use? Let's do 100, 20, and 50. Let's see how that works. Okay, very random color, but we have it in our rectangle. Finally, we can also create a circle and then move on to some kind of like animations or stuff like that. It's not a circle, it's an ellipse, I think. And the right pronunciation is an ellipse. As I showed to you before, all the functions and all the possibilities that you can think of, you can find in the reference file. So whenever you think of a shape and you don't know how to write it, you can go into here, references, shapes, ellipse, circle. I couldn't decide now. I can see that there's also an ellipse and also a circle. And you can see all these options. You can check out any other options. And here I can also click on it and it shows me how to use it. It firstly shows, hey, so this is how you draw it. And if I change something here, you could also re-edit it. And it also shows you the syntax. So what does the syntax mean? It means that in here, as we previously mentioned, this number defines this X defines, you put an X coordinate number. This will define where on the x-axis it would be and where on the y-axis it would be. The third and fourth numbers are width and height, where you can see that you can define its width and you can define its height. So it can be in different widths and different heights. The reason why this is in these rectangular braces is that you can also use it without the height. So let's say if we put 3 numbers only in, then it would use the width number for the height as well. So you could only stand out with 3 numbers. That is why the brackets are there, so don't get worried about that. Okay, so we have an ellipse. Similarly as rectangle, we will define its where it stands. We're going to say that it is at 70 and 200, somewhere near, and it's going to be a bit of a smaller rectangle in here. This is the rectangle we have. It's somewhat on this is the ellipse that we have, and it's somewhat on the rectangle that we drew in before. We can create a different fill as well. We can create a different color, and I think you got the overarching idea of how you can form shapes and how you can form colors. The next thing that we want to touch upon is also very, very simplistic things of how you can use P5 to draw something, to use something. For example, the most popular thing here would be to use the point and say that instead of it being static, we're going to use our mouse X coordinates and our mouse Y coordinates for the point to be there. So what we're going to write is mouse X and mouse Y. And you can see all of this in the examples in case you have questions about what's even possible. And as you can see now, the point follows my mouse. And this is the main thing that it can do now. It can always follow my mouse. And this could be actually very useful if you wanted to create a drawing application. Currently, it doesn't stay. It doesn't stay on the screen. And I'm going to slightly explain why it doesn't stay on the screen. So how it works is that the background that we drew before, that we're drawing here in the function draw, is being kind of reiterated every frame. Every couple of frames, how it works is that the application, it firstly reads function setup, then it sets it up, it creates the canvas, and maybe you will in the future have any other details that you want to add in there. Maybe there will be variables, maybe there will be something else that you really need, maybe you will need to change the width of your window size. But that is the thing that you need to set up. The second thing is the function draw. Function setup works only once. You open your application, you open your browser and your created application with your browser, and function setup runs once, but function draw keeps on running. And how it goes is that it opens function draw and reads background. Okay, change the background. Stroke weight, we'll define stroke weight. Point, we'll draw a point. Line, we'll draw a line. We'll draw a rectangle, we'll draw an ellipse. And then it won't stop. It will start again. When it's finished in this line, in the last line, it's going to go up and do a background again. So what happens here is that it keeps drawing a background again and again every frame, and keeps on drawing it over. And in case we want to see how it works in real life, is if we put it into function setup when it only runs once, we can see how it only drew the background once, and everything that goes on it, everything that moves on this background is going to stay there, because it's not going to be drawn over it again and again. It's just going to stay there in the beginning. And we can really use that to make some interesting things. One of the things is, yeah, you can come up with ways how to do a better drawing application. Another thing is that you can move things in a weird way around with the mouse. One of the options here, I think, is, what was in here? I had 20. I think we can try mouse X, and mouse Y. And press play. And here you can see that, ooh. Oh, sorry, actually, mouse X. And kind of, if you do the stroke weight into 1 and actually turn it to black, let's do a stroke of black. It looks like a code bar. That's what I've noticed. Only the point keeps following. Let's do the point and let's comment it out. And as you can see, it kind of like draws a barcode. So in here, one of the things that I also didn't mention, in case you want to keep something, but I want to comment something out so that you're not using it, the comments in JavaScript are two diagonal lines this way. They're also very useful in the future for using them in order to comment what you're doing and comment along what functions for which purpose. It's not very, very useful at this current moment, but once your application gets bigger and more extensive and more kind of like richer, you need to add these comments for anyone and yourself to remember what is this really for and what is this function really for. So the final thing that we also wanted to touch upon is random. So there's a function for random for this, and you can create a lot of exciting things just by using random. So random, we're going to use 0 and 100, or let's say 0 and 300. And we're going to do the ellipses Y location also as random. And we're going to say its Y location is going to be random. Y is random and it's 100. So what is most likely going to happen is there is going to be, as you can see, quite a lot of these balls bouncing around and creating more and more and more. And you can also use it for color. You can say, I actually want a random color, and I want a random color every frame. You can also slow down the frame, by the way. There's a function called frame rate where you can define how fast it is. As you can see here, there's quite a lot of these colorful balls bouncing around, and we can have our bar on top of them. And finally, what we can do with the rectangles, we can show you quickly how to move it around. So one of the first things that we can do is we can create a variable that in place of one of the coordinates for, let's say, one of the forms. In this case, all that is left in here and that is not used is our rectangle. So let's work with that currently. So in here we have a static rectangle. As you can see, it just stands there, it doesn't move. We can change the background, we can change a lot of things around it, and it doesn't move. What we can do is we can try to make it move in the right direction. So the right direction for me would be to increase its number. So as we mentioned before, the background or the create canvas, you define its height and width based on the coordinate system. So if we imagine it as a coordinate system and we have this screen where the 0, 0 point is on the top left corner, then everything that goes on the right is going to be a larger number than something that goes on the left. Everything that goes down is going to be a larger number than goes up. So how could we move a rectangle to the right? So one of the first things that comes into mind is we can increase that number. We can increase its x value, because the rectangle's first, the 50 is x value. It's where it stands in the x axis. Where is it in this point? As you can see, I can do play and I can show you. If I do 0, it's going to be here. If I do 100, it's going to move towards the middle. So what I can do here is I can try to push it and make it so that it slowly goes to the side until maybe it disappears. So the first thing I'm going to do is I will create a variable for this to happen. And variables are there really to help you do this in this current example, but in the future they're generally for those of you who don't know them, this is very useful. For those of you who do, just leverage the application, the library, and try to make the best out of it, because it is really, really used quite a lot. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable instead and put it inside of the number. So a variable can be a name or a character. So let's say var x. And our var x is going to define our rectangle's x value. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable like this. If the application needs, if you want the application to understand that it's a variable, you need to define it as var. Currently in this scenario in JavaScript, there's further applications for that as well. So let's start with this var x. We're going to put it in our rectangle. We can use it in here. And now, because we haven't set any value for this x, so x is what? It's just, we created some kind of variable. What it is, we don't know. It's just a character, and we just put it in here. So what's going to happen here? It's not here. It doesn't know. There's no really variable in here. So we're going to do that. It's 0. We're going to say that our x, this character, it is 0. And if we give it the value 0 and put it then in the place of the rectangle keeps that character, keeps that variable, and also thinks that it's a 0, and also assumes that number that we gave it. So let's try putting it as 10, and you can see that it's going to go a bit further. And how we can use that is we can say x plus plus, which is going to be the same as x is plus 1. And it's going to give x with every frame a plus value. So if we start out at, when we run the application, that x is 10, as we move forward, the x is going to increase and it's going to go higher. So what's going to happen is the rectangle is going to move to the right. And we can use this in quite a lot of games. In here, it's going to remain with this black line. And you can use that as well for different drawing. But if we do the background back again and put it back in the draw, we can see how it actually, oh, sorry, something skipped. Ah, yes. Yeah. Okay, so, and it's moving in the right direction, as we can see, and is going towards that way. And these are just kind of the beginning examples, especially for you if you haven't touched any of the coding before. This is a really good tool to start with, where you can build something very, very simplistically and very quickly, and then you can kind of grow it bigger and fuzzier the more you go. So what we're going to do next is let's remember how we created our application and try out, for example, creating a website where we would use this, for example, for a font. When you go back here to the P5 reference, you can go home to the home tab, and you can read through the possibilities how you can get started. I think it's actually in Get Started where you can find the information on how to, in case you don't want to use the editor and you don't want to test things, but maybe you want to add this to your website, or maybe you want this to be your website and your game. So how to use it. Here it says very, very simplistically, if you really read this, you can see that it really tells you what to do in very, very specific words. So it says, firstly, you will need to add this to your HTML script. An HTML page might look like this. So all we need to do is, firstly, we can actually just copy this and paste it into an index.html file. This is the second thing that we're going to do, is we're going to open Atom, a simple text editor, to start creating our first example of a simple HTML page, and then try and add this to add this library to our page. So we're going to say new file. We're going to say save as. This is our index.html. .html. Let's do desktop. And in here, we're just going to copy and paste what I said. An HTML page might look like this. Okay, let's start with the simplistics. After creating an index.html, we're going to create a new file. I think they're just on my desktop, so they should have been created in a project, please. Okay, so save as. What we're going to do is we're going to do a sketch.js. I'm going to show you why is that. You can actually change the name of it, and you cannot name it sketch. You can name it something else. But here you can see that what it does in the head of our HTML page is it references our sketch.js file. So whenever you're going to change this part of the file name, it's going to change. You need to change it in here as well. Other than that, you can stay with whatever you like, whatever it is. So in here, you need to start with 0.0. You need to create the functions and everything yourself. So how it works is that we're going to create our own function setup. We're going to define our create canvas. Define that it's going to be 800 by 1000. Let's do this. And after that, we will do function draw. And within our function draw, we will start by just creating firstly a background with 0, 200, and maybe 150. And then we will do we will also, sorry, there was some sound. Okay, so, and we will also create a shape. Let's do a simplistic shape. So let's do a rectangle. We love rectangles. 20, 20, 100, and 300. And let's see how we can actually go to the page, how we can open this with our browser. And this is something that we've coded. This is something we've created. And it's the first simple steps. But from this, you can really go forward. So I have my index.html. I have my sketch.js. This is fairly the basics. It's something very simple and easy to understand. And I think if I'm not mistaken, I saved it right here on my desktop. And I can open it with my Chrome browser. And I can see that I have an amazing empty rectangle together with a lovely green background. And this is something that we can start out by creating. And as I showed you before, there's also a music library in here that you can use and you can leverage. There's also quite a lot of animations that you can create. When you move forward and when you go through the examples, you can go into cycles, and you can find out how you can make things movable more and more. And this is something that is really easy to grasp and take advantage of the beginning. So for all of you out there who are interested or maybe considering to creating some ideas around games, creative computing, or the such, this is really the tool to use. You can create a lot of interesting games just by using this, and there's a lot of opportunities around creative computing that you can just check out in the examples and just start from building there. This is it about the code. And the final thing that I wanted to mention for you, in case you're still struggling with ideas and about how to build things, how to test things, there's quite a lot of information out there of examples of how to do this. And one specific about P5 is called open processing. So if you go to open processing, you firstly need to log in, but afterwards you can Google and find quite a lot of interesting examples of anyone who has built something using P5 or its very, very similar application that used to be more popular before, called processing. This currently is the one P5. You can Google, let's say, games or visualizations. Maybe that's a more visualizations, and you can see that there's quite a lot of options out there around visualizations that you can not only see in here. Some are just uploads, some are there to some of them are very intricate and some of them are very simple. But the key thing is that this is the platform where people share what they've built, with the goal that you take this and you make it better and then you upload it again. That is not necessarily for you to do so, but this is an open database of all the projects. So everything that you can have here, you need to reference that some of it is someone else's, but a part of that you can use it and apply to whatever project you wish. So for example, if I saw something like this, you can download the code in there, play around with it, and thus by playing around, find out what it means. And as you can see, yeah, there's some weird thing not rendering. But yeah, there's quite a lot. There's quite a lot to jump into the rabbit hole and to take a look at. There's I think even time clocks that are a wave clock. That was the key word. That can be used for also music visualizations, and it's very, very used on there as well. Something like this, where maybe you've seen it in VJ platforms and so on. Okay, so that's it for me. Hopefully these tools were useful. Hopefully there's some ideas that sparks into your mind, and maybe there's some something else that you came up with. And hopefully you can also use the platforms that I shared with you, such as open processing and P5, and there's others that will post in Slack as well. And think about something that you can build, because this is something that you can really, really use and build in 2 days quite extensively if you really work hard and you pay attention to it. Apart of that, on Slack, do you message me directly or ask in the mentors channel about any specific details that you want? If you're trying to use the P5 and if you've run into a problem and something's not working, please also message me in there. I will answer. I know it truly, and it will be easier for me to identify the problems in case you're sitting for a long time and cannot grasp it. So do use us mentors. We're here to help, and do ask questions in case you're trying to set up or trying to make this function work and it doesn't work and you can't figure out. Okay, yeah, that's it for me. Hopefully you had some inspirations from here, and good luck with the future. Good luck with the hackathon and your projects, and I can't wait to see what you make.